Interesting thing. Tonight's second night Rosh Chodesh, Tevet, and coincides with Hanukkah. It always coincides with Hanukkah. Always during Hanukkah there will be Rosh Chodesh, and I'm not sure if it's always 2 days, or it'll definitely be at least. But there's always Hanukkah time. There's always going to Rosh Chodesh is always going to coincide. Now we do on Hanukkah we say Hallel every day in Shacharit. We do Hallel. And we do Hallel every Rosh Chodesh as well. And usually on Rosh Chodesh, we don't do the full Hallel, but on Hanukkah we do. And when Hanukkah coincides with Rosh Chodesh, you do the full Hallel. Rosh Chodesh doesn't override Hanukkah, even though Rosh Chodesh happens 12 times a year, where Hanukkah only happens once a year. So the reason is that you say a full Hallel even though it's Rosh Chodesh, but it happens to be Hanukkah. The Hanukkah overrides Rosh Chodesh for Hallel. It's because of the major miracle of Hanukkah. I've got my notes here. It says here, it elevates the day's sanctity because of the miracle. And there's more praise when you say the full Hallel. That's basically what it's saying. So that's why. There are two paragraphs that are usually omitted on Rosh Chodesh, but we say them. We said them today and tomorrow. We're going to say it as well in Hallel, even though it's. It's Hanukkah. We say it even though it's Rosh Chodesh. So just an interesting fact. Whereas there's certain things on Shabbat, because Shabbat happens regularly, certain things take precedence on Shabbat. And you'd think the same would apply because Rosh Chodesh should override Hanukkah. But because of the miracle,
Okay, guys, can you hear me now? I've actually linked to another reshet. It was on gold and I put it back to gold, but can you hear me now, guys?
Yes.
Yeah, you did.
Sorry about this. Really apologies. All right. So, can I give a minute summary from yesterday, or can any of you guys give it back to me? Guys?
I think it's very you rather give it.
All right, so we were stating there's a principle. We're learning all these things that Rav Yehuda teaches in the name of Shmuel and Rav and various Brisa sources, Mishnaic sources, Pesukim, and obviously we started out about issues regarding debt cancellation, marital contract, Shemitah year, etc., etc. So often I said to you that the Gemara goes off on a tangent. If you remember, the first time this happened was when we were learning about Rav Chia and Rav Oshia, discussion on direct and indirect damage with regards to undiscernible damage in Bava Kama. And do you pay for undiscernible damage, indiscernible damage? With regards to wine that was tuma, but it didn't lose its qualitative nature and it didn't turn to vinegar. So then remember, we went off on a tangent and you learn what else Rabbi Oshia taught us. So it's the same thing here. So basically, we learn what Rav Yehuda taught us with regards to quoting Rav. And we said there was a principle. Firstly, for Brendan's sake, we said, what is a mikveh? It's a naturally collected body of rainwater. And what that's needed to do is purify utensils or human beings from tumah, which is spiritual contamination, in order to be tara for purity. Because one cannot get into contact with a dead body. You can't touch somebody that hasn't been to the mikveh if they've got tumah from menstrual nida, which is the menstruation period. A guy with a seminal emission, a zav, that's also a problem. You've got a sheretz, different categories of dead animals that can create a problem. It's a very, very complicated issue. Tara and Tuma are some of the most complicated issues, and even when I asked Rav Simcha Steinhauer, he said that that's not his field of expertise. All we generally do in Shas is we learn principle after principle and where they apply on that specific case. So it's a difficult one. And Lance brought an amazing question yesterday, which is when we were learning about dilution principles, he said, but one your dilution can be maximum 1 in 6. And what I said to him there was, there are different halachas with regards to knowing brochas, whether you're doing borei pri hagafen or share call, and the dilution measure dictates that, compared to what would make a valid mikveh in order to remove yourself from tumor contamination, at which you're dealing with immersion issues as opposed to issues of appropriate blessing allocation. So it was a valid point because we do see different formulas for calculation, but it is context specific. And even when you're dealing with kashrut itself, there are ratios that people have a 1/3 ratio in terms of kashrut, the majority versus the minority. You've got 1 in 60th dilution principles that are going to be brought into play, but that is on a kashrut level. So even then, there are different criteria. Now, what we said is in order that a mikveh is valid, it has to have 40 se'ah of natural rainwater. Anything more than 40 se'ah, if you put drawn water, it becomes part of the rainwater as you've covered your 40 se'ah, and it makes it operational and is not invalidated by the addition of drawn water. And in fact, any drawn water that comes in contact once you have 40 se'ah becomes mikveh valid water. I don't know a technical term to say that, but you get the drift. Now, Lance was bringing a good point that your average bath is actually 150 liters. So that's a small European bath. When I went on AI, it said that your average bath is 305 liters. Lance is a civil engineer. I have no idea. All I know is that when I get in my bath, and I'm short as a hobbit, I have to get in the fetal position. So I got shortchanged. That's all I know. But the question came about because Gavin, quite rightly, when he saw there was a quantity of 340.6 liters, he thought this was massive. And then Lance put it in perspective for us that, in fact, it's like a one-person mikveh, basically. We're not even talking about a community mikveh. So that made a lot of sense. So we said that what can invalidate a mikveh is when you have 3 lugin of drawn water and you're that short. So we said 1 lug is equivalent to 6 medium-sized chicken eggs. So 3 lugin is 18 medium-sized chicken eggs, which is 1.06 of a liter. So it's 1 liter and 6 milliliters. And a kosher mikveh of 40 se'ah is basically 340.6 milliliters. So in other words, if you have 339 milliliters and you add in the 1.06 of drawn water, it invalidates the mikveh. Now, this has only to do with drawn water that can contract the tumah, because goodness knows what people get up to in shenanigans with a well. So how do we know that this does not apply to any other liquid other than water? We said Edios, chapter 1, verse 3, in terms of the daf, and Mikvaos, chapter 2 and chapter 7, the first and the second Pesukim and commentaries deal with that. So we said that of the drawn water, there's no shala. If it's drawn water and that goes into 339 liters, it invalidates the whole mikveh. But the question arose, of which Rav Yehuda said in the name of Rav, is that if you have 3 login of drawn water into which a quartov of wine fell, and now we said the first thing you've got to know what the definition of a quartov is. So it's often used to denote a minute amount. Let me just tell you what the ratio is. You can see this in Bava Basra in the 90th daf. It gives you the exact definition. It's 1/64th of a log. So what does that mean? If you've got 3 lugin and a quartov is 1/64th, you have 192 parts in total, and 1 part out of 192 is a quartov. So it's a fractional amount. So if that, as Lance says, was 5 milliliters yesterday, goes into the entire, now it's not going into the entire mikveh. We're not dealing with that. We're looking at a subsection of 3 lugin of water. And if the quartov, which is 1 part out of a 192 of that, never mind the big mixture, is of 1, is that considered 3 lugin of drawn water, at which would invalidate, or does it somehow dilute it? So there are 2 principles of dilution. The first one would be an issue where it goes according to the majority of the mixture. In other words, if it's treated as there's 192 parts and 1 part is 100 out of 192 is 1, then obviously if you're going according to the majority of the mixture, it would make sense according to many opinions that's not sufficient to nullify the invalidation of the 3 lugin of drawn water. But if you want to go according to wine, because that's the mixture color, and the wine is so pungent that the color almost overtakes the water, then is that considered reasonable? So according to Rav Yehuda's opinion on Rav, that would make it operationally valid because it's dark enough where it doesn't look like water anymore, and it looks like what you call it, diluted or mild wine, and therefore does not invalidate the 3 lugin of water. And when that's chucked into the mixture of 339 liters, it does not invalidate the mikveh. I want you to all understand that before we proceed, because now it's going to get complicated. That was the easy part. I'm not doing well considering I'm on enough drugs to kill a horse. Thank Hashem for his help.
No, you're
But
doing well.
luckily for you, we all found it very easy. Carry on. No, we're joking. It wasn't.
Okay, no. You found it easy. It's good.
No, we didn't find it easy. We don't want to. We don't want to push you at all.
Okay. Any
keep
questions
going.
so far, guys? It's pretty clear.
Just Damon, so you got the 1/64th of a log,
Yeah.
it's a quarter, and that's like your concentrated wine. You add that into your 3 lugim, and then do you want it to look red or do you not want it to look red to make it valid?
I think everybody in the community and who put the effort together is praying it would not invalidate the mikveh. You want to know what people want? They want to get the hechsher with the least amount of effort, Lance. I'll give you that much.
What I'm saying is to make this thing kosher though, look, you're going to add this small volume of wine to a liter of water, okay? And then this you're going to add to 340 mils in the mikveh. So it'll eventually become, you won't see it in the bigger picture. But in a smaller picture, when you're looking at your 3 lugim, when you add the quartov to those 3 lugim, do you want it to be red or not?
Okay, so Lance is
Make it
asking
valid.
a reasonable question. Firstly, Lance, according to 1 lug, it's 1 in 64 parts. So according to 3 lug, you take 64 times by 3, right? So then what you're dealing with there is 192 parts. So it's 1 part out of 192 parts. So it gives you an idea of how diluted it is at 5 mil out of 1.06 liters. Okay, from what you said, it's 5 mil. That's what you told us yesterday, which is reasonable. So it's not what the rabbis want, because if the last thing the rabbis want to do is ruin a mikveh of 339 liters for 1 liter of drawn water. This is what you call bidi eved, when there's an accident that happens and they realize something went wrong. Nobody's going to plan with this degree of idiocy. They're going to go kal v'chomer, even more so. We'll add in, we'll chuck a whole bottle of Kerem wine in. Do you get what I'm saying? Nobody's going to make this mistake and be borderline. Nobody in their right mind. This is when there is a disaster and they're trying to work it out.
So this is similar to Lance's, what Lance was saying. If you throw in white wine, that won't count then.
That will not count according to not every opinion, but according to it has to be a color changer. It has to be a color changer.
It must have a winey look to it.
Exactly. I couldn't think of a better word. It must be a winey look to it.
Okay.
Okay, so otherwise you can't discern it from water. This is one of the subjects that's going to come out. There's a difference between constituency, at which some people hold that it has to be at least the majority, and when you're talking about such a minute fraction of 1 part out of 192 parts, then you have to say, well, then it has to at least have an impact in some regard. So as Juan says, not Juan, as Lance says, these drugs are amazing, by the way. As Lance says, it's got to have
Scary, scary,
look.
eh?
The wine doesn't say it has to have a Lancey look. Okay, sorry. So now this opinion is questioned because anybody that's looking at it is going to have the obvious question: what do you mean? You're going according to the mixture's color. It's so diluted within the 3 login itself. Never mind when you put it against a majority of 1 part to 339 parts. Of liters. This is 5 milliliters. So we only have to look at it firstly in terms of the 3 lugin that could obviously invalidate it from the drawn water perspective. So that already doesn't make it as fractionally marginal. It's marginal, but not in context to the greater picture, just in terms of the invalidation aspect. And then the obvious opinion is, well, surely we should go according to the majority of the mixture. So we're going to find opinions for both. Let's cover some ground. So the question is challenged again by Rav Kahana. Now you notice that Rav Kahana is often questioning Rav Yehuda. Can you see that? So you see in the Gemara you have Shmuel and Rav. You've got Rava, and you've got different protagonists that often choose the opposite side. So Rav Kahana again is challenging Rav Yehuda. Okay, and what he's saying is that how does this differ from colored water? In other words, okay, so you're bringing color into the mixture. Colored water is actually mainly water, but it's judged as water in accordance with its majority. Listen carefully. So when you take apart from wine, if you want to say the reason is it's according to the mixture's color, then Rav Kahana's argument to Rav Yehuda quoting Rav is that colored water too is mainly water in terms of majority in the mixture. And yet it's judged as water in accordance with that. And the 3 login of colored water actually invalidate a mikvah's water. How do we know this? We learned in a Mishnah, and that Mishnah is in Makkos, chapter 7, verse 3. And what do we learn? And that's actually the subject at which mikvahs are dealt with in detail in the Talmud that deals with mikvahs. And he was saying, for Rav Yossi says, colored water invalidates a mikvah with 3 login. So if 3 login of colored drawn water was spilt into a mikvah containing less than 40 se'ah of valid water, the water in the mikvah is invalidated for further use. Now this Mishnah contradicts Rav's ruling. Can you see why? Before we go on, is there anybody that can't see why? Speak now, guys, before it gets more complicated. Kev, Brendan, because I know, Brendan, you're not feeling too well, and Kev, what's the argument here?
That who's it? Rav Yossi said that about the coloring would invalidate the mikvah. If it adds color to it, like especially the red wine.
Exactly.
Red, yeah.
And
Because it's common sense.
The only one that's done revision here.
No, I did it about 2 weeks ago, but it makes common sense. Who would want to go into a mikveh that looks this red? Looks like no one wouldn't want to go into such a mikveh anyway.
Except vampires, but I get it.
Yeah.
So Kevin did this 2 weeks ago. So what we are saying is, accordingly, if you go in the Gemara in Makkos chapter 7, verse 3, it speaks about Rav Yossi, who says that colored water, if they're part of the 3 lugin, invalidate a mikveh. So this contradicts Rav Yehuda's opinion on Rav, that colored water is in effect does not invalidate a mikveh. So we want to know what's going on here. So Rava's response, and Kevin, a big thank you for preparing. I really appreciate it when you do that. You're one of the few that do, so thank you. So Rava's answer to Rav Kahana now is that in the case of colored water, the mixture is referred to as colored water. So since it retains the designation of water, it's treated as water, and 3 Luginov invalidates the mikveh if it's partially filled. But in Rav's case of wine-colored water, the mixture is referred to as diluted wine. Since it does not retain the appellation water, it's no longer classified as water, but as wine, and 3 lugin of wine do not invalidate a mikveh. So what it's saying is as follows. Wine is, according to Rava's opinion of Rav, is that wine has got, it's not just about the colored water, it's the color because it's seen as diluted wine. And therefore, a product other than water does not apart from drawn water, does not invalidate a mikveh should it complete the 40 se'ah. So the 3 lugin, if it's seen as diluted wine, so it's not about the color according to Rava's opinion in response to Rav Yossi. Everybody with me? If I'm messing up,
Yeah.
I'm drugged up, but I know what's going on in my head. But I just hope I'm communicating it well, because they said that you can't operate heavy machinery while you're on this. So Rav's ruling is challenged again. Now, this is from a different brisa. It's coming from all sides here. So Rav Chia taught in a brisa concerning 3 lugin of wine-colored water that fell in an incomplete mikveh, that they have downgraded the mikveh's water from a valid status to an invalid status, and the water cannot be used to complete the 40 se'ah. So this brisa refers to wine, and it clearly demonstrates that this contradicts Rav's ruling that wine-colored water does not invalidate a mikveh's water. Now, where does it get this sort of response from? So Rav has said, look, there's actually not a difficulty here. If you look at Rav Chia's opinion and you look at Rav Yossi's opinion, they coming from 2 different points of view. You've got the ruling of Rav Yehuda that on Rav that the color is a determining factor, and that actually follows the view of the Tana Rav Yochanan ben Nuri. Whereas the brisa of Rav Chia contradicts the view of Rav Yochanan ben Nuri, but that's the opinion of the Tanakama. So when we say the Tanakama, we said it's the unanimous opinion of the majority of rabbis, and it's also anonymous because it doesn't pick out a particular rabbi, but it's the general consensus. So again, the last brisa that says that the minute you have 3 login of wine-colored water, not normal colored water, that immediately Rava would seem to have no response to that, because he made the distinction to Rav Yossi. There's a difference between an appellation that's referred to as diluted wine compared to colored water. And Rav Chia is saying that's not true, because if you look at wine-colored water, it says that it's downgraded the mikveh to an invalid status, and therefore how would he explain that? And Rava's response is they're 2 different tanoim. There's Rav Yochanan ben Nuri, who holds that color is the deciding factor, whereas the view of the rabbis disregard color as a factor. And what proof does he bring? We've learned in the Mishnah. Now he's bringing the same Mishnah, by the way, as Rav Kahana brought, and that was Mikvah chapter 7 verse 3. There's no better way to argue a case than to bring the same Mishnah, because that's a foregone checkmate. So it says lesser kortov. In other words, that brings a particular factor here, that something less than a full 3 lugin of drawn water, into which a kortov of wine fell. So now there's a total, guys, of 3 lugin of liquid in this container. And the colors, the mixture is like the color of wine. If those 3 lugin then fill into a mikveh, they don't invalidate the water. And that mikveh can be used to complete the required measure of 40 se'ah. And what's the reason? Is that it doesn't contain a full lugin of drawn water, since it was the drop of wine that basically completed the 3 log measure. So you can infer that had there be 3 lugin of water in the mixture besides the wine, they would invalidate the mikveh in spite of the wine color, as stated in the Bryce of Rav Chia. So all he's trying to say is this factor of lesser kotov. That's what completed the 3 lugin of water. And therefore you need a minimum of 3 lugin of drawn water in order to invalidate the mikveh. If you've got slightly less, Lance, even 5 milliliters less, it's not a 3 lugin of drawn water, and therefore it wouldn't invalidate the mikveh. So it's not about the wine status. Here it's a factor of what completes the quantity. Even if the mixture looks like the color of wine. That's according to like the Tanna Kamma opinion, and that would answer the Bryce according to Rav Chia, because he's saying you're still good with the Tanna Kamma because it's about the total content of what do you call it, invalidated water. So he was saying, look, similarly, 3 login of drawn water, lesser kotov, in which a kotov of milk fell, and the color of mixture is like the color of water. It's colorless. Why? Because if you take milk and you put it, it's different to wine, then what happens is you won't see any discernible difference between the water. But if those 3 lugin of that mixture fell in a mikveh, they don't invalidate it because there's not a full lugin of drawn water. So although the mixture in it has technically color in it, in other words, milk has a color, the non-water substance to the eye doesn't blend with the water to complete the 3 lugin measure. So it wouldn't be good enough according to the opinion of Rav Yochanan ben Nuri, because Rav Yochanan ben Nuri is saying that color is a factor, not within the greater mikveh, but within the 3 lugin. And since it's indiscernible if milk spilt into it, it would invalidate the mikveh. But according to the Tanna Kamma, the very fact that the mixture together doesn't make on its own 3 lugin of drawn water, there's no problem. If you had 3 lugin of drawn water plus a kotov, invalidates the mikveh. Do you see how simple it is? I'm trying to give it over simply. I'm goofed up, but I'm trying to give it over simply. Guys, feedback?
No.
Any question?
So the bottom line is, so the one opinion says that it's not considered wine, it's considered water. Okay, that's the second opinion that you got now. The first opinion from this Gemara says that no, the color is a factor. Why do they go the route of using color as a determining factor to whether it's wine or not? Why not taste? Because normally, when it comes to kashrut, 1/60th is when you always say when your a bit of milk falls into the meat soup. How do you check? Oh, if it tastes milky. Okay, so with a wine, when you got this portof that's mixed into the 3 lugim, why are they using color as a basis and not taste? Because if they were using taste, then there wouldn't be a question with the second Gemara where they were saying that, oh, it's actually just water. If it tasted like wine, you know what I'm saying? You should rather work on taste, not on color.
Lance, am I able to give you? Is there another part to your question? I've listened to it carefully.
No, that's it. That's my question. Basically, why they're working on color, not on taste.
Okay. Well, firstly, let me just answer it to, it's not about the first or second opinion. First thing is that in your head, in order to give over the Gemara, there's a sequence. So just know that according to Rav Yehuda is quoting Rav is going according to the Tana Rav Yochanan ben Nuri, who said that color's a factor. Just let me finish. And according to the Tanna Kamma, the general view of the rabbis, they disregard color as a factor completely. Okay. Now, the thing with Gemara is, how do we see it from a point of view that's not our obvious inclination? When we always learn about the Tanaim, there's always a view in Gemara that you will go with one as opposed to the other. The entire point of the Gemara is to try and see it to its end and to stretch one's thinking to know, to get out of one's logical comfort zone, because invariably always somebody's going to go with a particular affinity with a particular opinion. So the whole point here is to stretch one. Regarding your second point, Rav Chia threw a spanner in the works here, because he said, well, Rava answered that this mixture is now a matter of wording. So one of the criteria, the Gemara, now take this up with Rabbi Goldschmidt with pleasure, but the Gemara is using its definitions. We can't use our definition of taste. Again, Lance, it's not an issue of kashrut, where it's a taste testing method. It's a method of basically dilution principles with regard to tuma and tara for contamination. They're completely different to kashrut issues of to be able to consume a product versus immersion. They're two completely different criteria they use. So just know that Rav Kahana's answer by Rava was, look, here there's a definition aspect. And that definition, according to Rava's answer of Rav, is that it's not about even color. Is it considered diluted wine, or is it considered color? Because if you're going according to certain opinions, the color, like the Tanakama, doesn't matter. When you're dealing with diluted wine, and it still in fact has the appellation of wine and not water, then anything that's not drawn water does not invalidate a mikveh. So it can't, they don't use the same dilution principles in consumption as they do in terms of immersion. So that's something to bear in mind. Now, in response to that, the last point that was made when Rav Chia is turning around and saying, look, you want to use this big definition of diluted wine. So let's just say we take wine-colored water. So if your issue is color, there's a problem. If there's a definition difference of diluted wine, there's a problem, because it's downgraded the mikveh status from valid to invalid. And then Rava has to say that there's no difficulty at all. Because if you look at the same Gemara of Mikvahos, chapter 7, verse 3, that was originally used, is that Rav Chia is going according to the opinion of the Tanakama, where color, Lance, is not a factor. According to the Tana Rav Yochanan ben Nuri, it is a factor. Now, the reason I'm not going to argue with them is those Tanaim were capable of reviving the dead. So who am I to ask? You can ask your local rabbinic rabbi. If they can revive the dead, I can't hardly get up in the morning. I think they're at a different level. I'm just going to go with the flow. But there are different opinions. And what I want you guys to do when we finish the Gemara is listen to all the arguments to see if they're going to come to some sort of compromise. Some of the arguments are refuted, where we're going to go today, because at the end, there's a summary on the complexity of all the variations. And when you see it in photograph, as well as me explaining the summary, it's amazing how a physical graphic representation makes it clear. I've kept all these arguments in my head. Then I found the chart after I did it. It would have been a heck of a lot easier if I found the chart before. All right, guys, we're going to end 7 minutes early because I've got squirrels rattling in my brain. I hope I did okay to explain everything.
Yeah, you were clear.
All right.
Yeah, refer Shlomo.
Yeah, refer Shlomo. Feel better.
Amen. Cheers, guys.
Yeah.